you through a business IA1 example from this year. It's a 20 out of 25. I've obviously got rid of the name, but you can see here the criteria. This person, she got a 20 out of 25, and I'm interested in finding out what filter she used in the first two questions. Why was her evaluating average? Why was her analysis and synthesis kind of good, probably her strongest? And why was her communicating a 3? I want to find out those questions with you guys, but I also want to draw your attention to the way that this criteria is now changing. You've now got an extra mark for describing this year. You've got an extra 2 marks for evaluating, so it's out of 7. Make sure you evaluate strong. Your analysis and synthesis has got 3 less marks, so your long answer is actually analysis and synthesis is now 7 marks instead of 10 collectively, and your communicating remains a 3. So heading into your exam, I hope that this is very helpful and I hope you can get something out of it. Your exam will be the same in terms of competitive markets diversification and the 2 hours working time with the 15 minutes of planning. So looking at her, what's it called? Short answer, mark A. She got only 3 out of 4 for these two explaining questions. And I did want to just see what filter she used. So for the first one, the maturity stage of the business life cycle is the third once the business has already passed startup and growth. This is a general topic, sentence, and answer to the question. That's fine. What she then does go and do in an okay fashion is she uses people when the company has fully captured its target market and cannot grow much further as it has hit the peak of its market. So people, profit, and market have been used as a filter. She went market, profit here, profit, I think. But yeah, she did okay in this regard. And then in the second question, still on explain, only 3 out of 4 here, she's gone and used a wheel, just a general paragraph in response to the question. So overseas manufacturing is an effective method for a business to enter into a global market. That's her topic sentence, and then she goes in and explains, exemplifies, and links back to profit or the bottom line, which is it's an okay method. However, you decide she only got 3 out of 4 for this for this question and this question together. My suggestion is that she would do more in depth on if she is using people, profit, and market. She needs to go into more in depth, not just on this section, not on the profit or the market section, but also she's probably neglected the people, the management side of things. So always remember that the aim of this business syllabus is to make you better decision makers as a manager. So always consider that internal management lens when you're talking about anything. Don't neglect it, because otherwise you're just going to tell me facts and you're not going to tell me anything interesting or new or in good strategy. So always remember the manager perspective. And in terms of overseas manufacturing, this question, what did we get? The link was back to the profits. Yeah, she might have, I think she just generally answered this question and didn't filter a certain way. So, second question or second sort of criteria is the description criteria, and this is the third question. It says, describe the operating environment that Aldi was situated in. So know your operating environment, the CISC, and you'll note that she only has the competitors and the customers. So she missed out on suppliers. And if that's the case, if there is no information, like she's referring really well to the stimulus about all these different customers and the competitors, if there's no mention of the suppliers, just mention it in your answer, because it demonstrates a fuller description of the whole environment. Because although there's no data to explain to explain it, if she had mentioned the suppliers, put an S there, and had talked about all three parts of the operating environment, then you're looking at a fuller answer and a fuller mark out of four for you guys, particularly the 4 out of 4. You need to put that filter all the way through your answer. Also, there's been a misread on the C, so be studious on what the CISC is. I think she's misfired on the culture. I think she was just looking for another C, and she might have confused them. So be strict on what you remember on the filters. The operating environment is customer. I nearly said it. Is customers, suppliers, competitors, and culture is actually a part of MEX in the internal environment, so not in the operating environment. Okay, so those are the filters. Now we're looking at 3 out of 5, which is an average mark for a person that got 20 out of 25. The evaluation was really average. So I want to ask you, why is it average? And I'm going to tell you why. Because, oh yeah, one thing before I get into why it's average is the question asked for one strategy that was used by Aldi to enter the Australian market. So just be careful. If it says a finance strategy, you need to be particular and strict on that, and you've got to mention those finance strategies of debt finance, and you might be looking to hedge or do these other things that are strategic. Your equity financing. You need to think of all these different ways. Going public, initial public offering. These are financial strategies. However, in this answer, in this type of question, she was actually allowed to talk about any strategy. So you then open it up to these other things like market development, for example. That's one strategy that we can use to get overseas, and one strategy that Aldi used in this case. So yeah, first of all, the good things, ticks here, ticks here, ticks here, are circulating of the stimulus. That's good practice. However, the reason that I've given her only an average mark for evaluating is because only in this point do we actually get, first of all, a rating. That's as close to a rating as she got. She said was definitely suitable for the company. These strategies was definitely suitable, and that's her getting at effectiveness, uh, slight effectiveness, slight efficiency, but that was as much as I got from her about the strict evaluation of using criteria. So the criteria she was supposed to use was effectiveness and competitiveness. And despite there being references to other companies and how well Aldi was growing in Australia, the competitiveness wasn't really there, nor was the effectiveness. So be deliberate, use the language. She needs to just go in and actually, if she's not using a table, she needs to start sentences with the effectiveness was, and then extremely, extremely reliable due to meeting the goals of the business, and competitiveness. The market share needs to be more than just fact quoted. It needs to be compared to another competitor, and then you've got some actual evaluation and justification. So where she did save herself was in the recommendations. You can see that she's gone and used a lot of the textbook language on risks, loss of consumer profit contingents. She's talked about contingency planning, so just mentioning that demonstrates a a sort of business textbook knowledge of what is appropriate practice, and she recommends that appropriately. And the recommendations really saves her because she's also made reference to the PPR model. She didn't call it that, but she just said the contingency planning prepared from any future risks. Yeah, she's referred to the PPR model and given a good contingency plan recommendation, but her evaluation just wasn't to the criteria, and therefore it's only average. So that's the reason why her evaluation is average. Moving on to part C, you can see best. This was her best work. 4 out of 5 for analysis. 4 out of 5 for synthesis. And I'll give you some tips for her to actually get 5 out of 5 in particularly synthesis. Analysis, she might be able to do that easily by just using a table and saying a lot in less words. Suncorp, a successful large Australian bank, high-on ASX listed company supporting millions of customers. So she just starts that as the strengths because she writes her SWOT. Stimulus reference perfect. Then she goes into weaknesses with data and reference. This is really good use of the stimulus references and opportunities. Stimulus, threats, she goes through all that. And pretty much a 2-3 points sort of per quadrant on the SWOT if you were to picture that visually, which is great with references. Great job. And I've given it ticks along further because this sort of language that I've underlined. So I'll read the sentence. These weaknesses and threats may decrease Suncorp's internal and external environment, so their strengths and opportunities should be emphasized. This is now going into synthesis language. Because of this, she's now demonstrating thinking by saying, so there's strengths and opportunities. So there's implications considered now once she's already started to use that language. She then directly uses synthesis language. The implications of these strategies for competitiveness are all I'm dubious on the fact that they're all positive. Remember that any strategy, any implication, any trend is never all positive. Let that be clear in all your recommendations and all your synthesis. Even if it looks uber positive and looks like that's going to be a good thing, remember that at the end of every good thing is the inverse of it is, or too much of it is a bad thing. And remember that for your business. So yeah, implications. This synthesis language is good to make it even stronger. Even though this is already a very strong synthesis with reference to the stimulus, I would suggest she actually uses implications patterns. I think she needs to use the word patterns, and she needs to use the word trends. So if she starts it like a topic sentence like this, the implications of these strategies or the patterns that a mature business follows is, or the trends of society are, she then starts to synthesize even more powerfully than she has demonstrated, which would be really good and a 5 out of 5. I just wanted to highlight this little bit here is the story, what I call the story or the donuts. She's got the story down pat. She says, the threats is clear. It is clear the company is in the maturity stage as there is an established market and culture alongside a steady income with common threats such as increased competitive. So she knows what she's talking about in this stage. She's locked in on the diversification and the maturity stage. She knows what she wants to say and check all her knowledge against, and that's the story that I want you guys to be able to tell as well and repeat. Something that I would want you to repeat to me, well, and whoever's marking this externally. So the recommendations follows the people profit sort of filter. So you might like to think about that. Recommendations having a filter, people profit market. Once again, that's a great reference to people, though, the leadership theories, because that's a bit of content that we don't necessarily always hit. But like I said, you want to always be remembering that this whole program, this whole syllabus is about making you guys manager sort of material, manager perspective, good at just making decisions as a manager. So this leadership styles and theories is worth mentioning within your answers or weaving in. She's gone to triple bottom line and cost benefit analysis. These are all evaluating finance strategies, and just mentioning them in your recommendations makes your buzzwords and your business textbook knowledge. It makes that visible to whoever's marking. So that's a good job on dropping those in there. And then she goes and sums up again what she's written. So overall, you can see what she got for that. Accurate, So right back up the top again, you've got an accurate, significant, relevant elements of business concepts, comprehensive explanation, and purposeful terminology.